Welcome to the Salt Strong Fishing Podcast. Salt Strong has been helping saltwater anglers catch more fish in less time for 10 years and is now the largest and most trusted saltwater fishing community in America. If you want to catch more saltwater fish, then keep listening. If you want to speed up your fish catching results even faster, then join the private insider community at saltstrong.com. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Inside the brain of multi-world record fishing holder Captain Peter Deeks. Hey everybody, Joe Simons, like diamonds. This is going to be a really cool one. So if you don't know, our Insider Club, we have a lot of cool things that we do, cool perks, cool events. We got, things going on literally every single month, face-to-face live meetings, guest speakers, etc. And one of the cool things that we do is every once in a while we'll do a live call, usually like in the evening, like on a Thursday evening. And we do it just for our Insider members only. They can join live and ask questions, and we record it. And I recently had Captain Peter Deeks on to share just kind of inside his mind on how he thinks when he uses certain baits or lures. And this guy to have now, I guess, 7+ world records, off your boat. That's not an accident. Once we do it once, maybe you got lucky, but that many times, and he's just so consistent on these big trophy fish. That's why people like Bill Dance use Captain Peter Deeks and hire Peter Deeks when they need to go catch a really big fish on the show. Johnny Morris, the founder of Bass Pro, hires out Captain Peter Deeks when he wants to go down to Florida and get on a trophy fish. So he is the man, the myth, the legend, and we have him here. So once again, this is something that normally only Insider members can hear, but it was so good we wanted to share it with as many people as can. And if you like this is just a fraction of what you get as an Insider member on top of the daily tackle discounts, free tackle. We actually send out free tackle every month to our members to test out. We have all kinds of stuff on the coaching and education side. That's how the whole company started. And now with smart fishing spots and smart fishing tides, the list just keeps going on and on. So if you haven't joined, come join us in the Insider Club at saltstrong.com. Otherwise, here is the crew and Captain Peter Deeks with a fun interview.
All right, guys, welcome in. We'll let some people funnel in. I know there were quite a few in the waiting room, about 30, 40 people. So we'll let the rest of you guys funnel in here. And as you can see, we got our guest speaker, Captain Peter Deeks, here with us. How you doing, man?
Good. Thanks for having me. Excited about this.
Yes, sir. Excited to hear the info you got.
Go
ahead, Pat.
I was just saying we had a lot of people excited that you're here, Captain. A lot of questions in the community already, and they're excited to hear from you.
Super cool. Yeah, fresh off the boat, not showered. Do my best.
Awesome. Yeah, and if we don't have enough questions, I got plenty for you. So
cool.
So Scott here, in case you didn't know, he's our Texas guy. He's out there in Galveston, and he is a trout. He's a trout guy all the way. So
right on.
Yeah, think he's a big fan of yours, right?
Oh, super cool. Yeah, that's a great area to fish out there, South Texas. They got some giant trout.
No, yeah.
A lot of bait casters, a lot of artificial lures.
That's all we do, man. Bait casters and artificial lures. The only way to go.
We're trying to get you guys these little spinning rods, but no, that's cool. It's a game.
We tried. It ain't working. It ain't happening.
I'll use it for a popping cork, but not any lures.
What is your go-to setup out there for lures? Is it? I guess it changes on the season. You guys use a lot of corkies or more swim baits like the slam shaped paddle tails, or?
Yeah, I mean, man, I have, oh my gosh, I've got a closet full of lures, and I know a lot of us do. But small paddle tails, down south lures are wildly popular here. It's like a straight tail with a tiny paddle on the end, kind of like a hybrid. And okay. I would say 70% of people are fishing that lure, probably over 50% of the time. Corkies are only popular in the winter. It's a big misconception. Like that's a wintertime only lure. Obviously you can catch fish on it year round, but, I mean, it's a slow suspending, why wouldn't you throw that year round? But yeah, the topwaters, obviously, those are fun. There's nothing more exciting than a topwater bite, but yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of people fishing from that area, and they mention corkies a lot. So I just kind of assume that's super popular.
It is, and everybody thinks that you're only going to catch the giants on a corky and that you can't catch one on something else. And it's like, I mean, I don't know. It's just, I'm not bought into the hype. I have them, I fish them. Don't get me wrong, but it's not. I mean, that's what you hear from the Texas guys.
Yeah, true. They don't work super great over where I fish on like the central East Coast. I try them a bunch because everybody gives them to me and stuff. There's cool lure, but I'd say paddle tail is like, it's kind of our trout go-to. Trout are getting smarter. We don't catch as many big ones on topwater plugs anymore. Used to catch a lot of them, get smaller ones. But yeah, it's kind of that finesse approach, having a light jig head on a paddle tail seems to be kind of fool now.
Oh yeah. Same here. That's pretty much what we do. So
yeah, it's funny, Peter, if you go out to Texas, and I'm not kidding, I've been out there a lot, and you get into like a local tackle store there, and there will literally be a wall of corkies, like every color, and it's not just there's different brands of them too.
Yeah.
But it's literally, you could thousands on the wall, just there. It's nuts.
I love them.
Yeah, they sell. I mean, and people swear by them. I mean, you go from like mid-October to like February, and there is, I would say, 50% of the anglers here, and we have a lot of them. That's all they will throw. Like there will be 3 rods with 3 different corkies on it, and that's what they're bringing. Like it's ridiculous. Anyway, they're trendy as can be, man.
As soon as the high school girls put the Uggs boots on, that's when they break out the corkies about the same time.
It's the Ugg boots of the Texas trout fishermen. Good analogy, Pat.
We should probably get into these questions here real quick.
Sure.
I'm going to throw this one at you, Peter. This one's from Tony, one of our insiders. He's saying, who makes the best side scan and how to use it to find fish, as well as how to know the difference between fish and other objects?
Good question. So we did a fish finder course, which we didn't cover the side imaging that much, but I would highly recommend going through that course. It teaches you a lot. I am biased, but because I choose to be, I fish humminbird for side imaging inshore saltwater fishing. Humminbird makes the best transducer to. On your screen, it will articulate the fish the best. So you can tell the difference between a snook and a redfish versus a snook and a rock. So all of the units will tell you the difference between a fish and a rock. But to see the tail definition and to see the shape of the fish and a lot of things like that, that's why I choose humminbird. But Garmin makes a great user-friendly unit that works super well. They all really do. The technology is great. But I personally, on all my boats, I use humminbird or a humminbird hat now. But for what we do is near shore, shallow water, saltwater anglers, I think they have the best readable machine to see the fish. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky when identifying the fish. The best way to see fish and to tell that they're fish and to see where they are is to go, let's say, 1 mile per hour in a straight line. How these units read is it's not a live feed as like a like the live view where you're going to see the actual fish swimming around. It's shooting a laser beam, this side imaging, out the sides of your boat, and it's reading what it's seeing, and it's charting that on a graph, kind of like a blood pressure or heart rate monitor you'd see at a hospital, and it's painting a picture for you. What you see on your graph is old. You've already been over that. That's not what's there right now. So a lot of people look on the machine, they see a bunch of fish on there. You've passed that, or those fish have passed you. If the fish is sitting still next to the side of your boat, it's going to continue to read that object, and it's going to look like a big pill or an eel or a big just black object. And it could be a bottlenose dolphin or it could be a minnow. In order to see those fish, you want to go in a straight line and go really slow, ideally less than 2 miles per hour. When you get to like 3 miles per hour, even a tarpon will look kind of small, but don't curve your boat back and forth. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll go down a dock line or a bridge in a straight line. I'll see where the fish are. I'll see what the fish are. You can see the shapes, the sheep's head, the black drum, the pilings. You can see what that is. Then I'll come back and fish it. It's really hard to sit in a single position and fish with it, because if the fish are 1 inch ahead of that reading or 1 inch behind it, you're not even going to know they're there. And if they're breaking that frequency line like a laser, and you're not moving and they're not moving, it distorts the image. So it takes a little trick to kind of learn how to see the fish, to identify the fish. But if you go in a straight line really slow, especially with your trolling motor, you're going to be able to identify the fish over other objects.
Yeah. I always tell people the fish finder is really only as good as the person using it. If you can actually know what you're looking at, they all pretty much put off the same type of display per se. But yeah, the eye-opening thing for me was actually seeing a school of black drum like on the fish finder and then fishing and actually catching them. It's like, okay, now it makes sense. That's what they look like. And that's what you're seeing on the fish finder. So yeah, good stuff.
And one more thing to throw in with that, it's most effective in water that's maybe 4 feet deep to, on the side imaging, maybe to like 30 or 40 feet deep. Anything deeper or shallower than that, it's not very effective because the angle isn't going to be right.
No.
Yeah, I have a question. Next one from James Overman. He's saying, when using smart spots to plan for a fishing trip, the high res and Bing satellites show a small inlet on a beach that's not in the normal satellite image. Which one is the most recent? Typically, and this is not in all cases, the normal is going to be the oldest one. The Bing and the high res is going to be newer. But these images are taking, at different times, and it's going to be up to whoever's, giving us that information on when they update those photos or not. So they're not live. They're not, extremely up to date. Some of them might be, but figure most of them, it's just there for scouting, and they could be as many, as a couple of years old. So just use that as loose reference and not as an absolute, and you'll be okay. But usually the high res is probably the newest
Stuff. All right, we'll go ahead and get to the live questions here. We had a few pop in. This first one's from Steven. Peter, you could probably touch on this one too, but he's asking about sharing tips on fishing tideless waters like up Indian River, Melbourne, Florida area.
Tricky. You fish an area that has a lot of tide, like Tampa Bay or further north or south. You can kind of look at a map and tell where the fish are going to be. Having never fished an area, it's really tricky in the Melbourne area. My biggest recommendation is go and look for fish before you find fish, or look for bait, fish the bait. But looking at a map and saying this spot looks good because the mangrove point, it doesn't mean that there's going to be fish there. Places that look good aren't necessarily good. But if you find bait, I like to fish anywhere from like 2 to 4 feet of water. Really shallow isn't super great. Really deep isn't really great. But if you find bait in structure, docks, mangroves, sandbars, in that water depth, a lot of bait, that's a good area to fish. But for all of my charters and all of my fishing, I visually see the fish before I fish them, whether it's that day and I come back 30 minutes later, or if it was a week ago, I go through with my trolling motor, wade fish, push pole, kayak, however you're going to do it, see the fish, see where they're at, then come back and fish them. Those fish will return, and then you can kind of replicate it within maybe a quarter of a mile of that area. But it's tricky to like pinpoint, like, hey, go fish this area. Because there's no water movement. Those fish are in an area because they want to be there. You can't really forecast that.
So how would you factor in the wind? Like for me personally, I tend to focus on what the wind's doing, like especially like Banana River, Mosquito Lagoon, Indian River, just because there's no tide and that's kind of like the only thing that will move the water. Would you say like this time of year fishing those shorelines that the wind's blown into or those points that the wind's blown into, that would be a good strategy?
So if you fish an area that's protected by the wind, you're going to find more fish. They're going to be less receptive to biting your bait. They're going to be very spooky. They're not necessarily there to feed. If you find fish in a wind-blown area, those game fish don't necessarily want to be there. They've got sediment blowing in their eyes. They've got a little more current, especially in Melbourne. You got like more current coming through. They're not used to it. If they're there to feed. That disruption, the wave action, and the wind pushes current, like Tony was saying. And so it's going to push and drive bait fish through. The bait fish are going to be a little bit kind of discombobulated, and it's going to be easier for those big fish to feed. So snook, trout, redfish, tarpon. I like to fish, especially with bait. I'll fish the wind blown areas. I like to fish usually like not necessarily a point that sticks out where current's wrapping around like you would in a tide area. I'll fish like a shoreline that parallels the wind, or maybe the wind's blowing into it. And that way, those fish are going to roam back and forth. The game fish are going to roam back and forth, feeding on those bait fish and stuff that's disrupted up in there. But I do find myself fishing wind protected areas if I'm going to use artificials, and I'll fish kind of those rougher windblown areas if I'm going to use bait. But yeah, definitely the wind's going to pull that current. And if you fish a little creek mouths or areas where the water is going to be concentrated, that wind's going to create current where there wouldn't otherwise be. And those can be good places too.
How do you feel about the barometric pressure? Do you think that the barometric pressure matters more on the non-tidal areas simply because that's, like on a strong tidal area, like you're talking about Tampa, like we've got some very strong tides here. And I don't put a lot of eggs in the barometric pressure basket just because I've got like raging current. And I think that like current areas might have a little less effect from barometric pressure. What's your thoughts on that?
The Solner tables, like the major feed times, they are going to a major feed time. You want to fish your best spot and your best fish at a major feed time. I'm not a huge believer in like, that's when the only time you want to go fishing. I have to fish every day and I catch fish on the worst times and the best times, but you're going to definitely see an increase in feeding activity on those Solner tables, which are based on tide and pressure. Now, the pressure that comes from storms and fronts and things like that, we're going to get more tidal movement. I find that the fish probably feed a little bit better. They get more active and the bait gets more disrupted. So like when the tropical storms come through, if leading up to it and right after is a great time to fish. And you're going to find that the pressure is changing a lot. So a high pressure isn't my favorite time to fish, but a change in pressure is probably my favorite time to fish. Well, it's going from low to high or high to low, but a stagnant high pressure is not a great time to fish, regardless of what it's affecting the current and the tide.
Now, how do you feel about water clarity in our area? Is it important to find cleaner water, or you just look for the bait, and wherever the bait's at, that's where you're going to fish?
Really, wherever the bait's at. Right now, we have tremendous algae blooms in most, I guess, the northern half of the Indian River. I fished Titusville yesterday and the day before, and we smashed the fish. There's lots of tarpon. It's the best red fishing I've seen in a really long time. But the areas that had the really dirty water, there was nothing. And then there was pockets of clean water and everything was in there. So that dirty water was actually, felt like it was like a net, and it was like smearing the fish and the fish are running from it. So in that case, if you're fishing here and you see these algae blooms, I try to avoid it. But now if the whole river's dirty, it just is what it is, and you just kind of, make the best of it. But if given the option, clean water and bait is going to be better than dirty water and bait.
Yeah. Saw the same thing this week. I was out in the open water. It was dirty, murky, pushed a little further back, found some cleaner water and grass, and redfish were crawling all over it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Saw the same thing. You want to grab that next question from Rob there, Tony?
Yeah, he was asking if we can discuss how you can use side scan to find grass lines. What's the secret? So that's kind of tough to explain without actually showing the screen. Inshore, I don't really use it to find grass lines. You can usually see them visually. If you have a good pair of polarized glasses, as long as the water's clean. If the water's dirty, there's a good chance there's probably not going to be grass there because the grass needs the sunlight to grow. But you can usually see the grass lines in the water. Wait for that sun to get up a little bit higher. That makes it easier to see. But if you're looking for them in deeper water, like let's say you're fishing a lake, I'll do this when bass fishing. If you're going along and it's just flat bottom, all of a sudden you start seeing, it almost looks like white noise almost on the fish finder, and that'll be grass. You'll see it sort of come up at a certain height and then it sort of levels out. That's going to be grass. It's not going to look like a solid object. If you go by a piling and you see the solid white sort of color of the piling and you see the shadow behind it, the black shadow, not really going to look like that. It's just going to look like a lot of blur on the screen as far as grass goes.
I've got this next question from Mike. He said he saw a 6 snook early in the morning today, which was the last time that they were really biting, but they shunned the Slam Shady. Was it because it had a yellow jig head? Salt Strong was out of the regular ones. Let's see. That was top of the incoming tide around 8:30. Last question: prawn in seabeds or next to seabeds, let it sink and jig. Where do you cast? When to use a weedless versus non-weedless on the Slam Shady? Any difference in action? So let's answer this first question about snook. Snook are very perceptive. If they see, or if you see them, then they see you. A lot of times, if they know you're in the area, they can shut down unless they're feeding really aggressively already. The best time to go after snook really is in the twilight. So pre-dawn, right at sunrise, maybe a little bit after. The way that their eyes are designed, they design to feed in low light situations. They feed better that way. Not saying you can't catch them during the day, but it becomes a little bit more difficult, especially whenever this water temperature gets up. So what I would probably do, if you were to run across this situation before, the snook are probably going to stay in that same area if the conditions stay the same. So try to approach the area again, stay off a little bit, try to make longer, more accurate casts, and present your bait before you can actually see them. And that way, they don't know you're there. You got to be stealthy. You got to be quiet. The yellow jig head, that doesn't really make a difference. I'm not a huge believer in jig head colors making that much of a difference. I typically use the unpainted lead ones. About the weedless and non-weedless, if you can get away with it, it's always better to use a non-weedless and open-faced jig head because you're going to have a better hookup ratio. The only time you really need to go to weedless is whenever you're having issues with the weeds clogging your hookup. In that case, you're kind of forced to do that. But if you can get away with an open jig head, use the open jig head.
So going back to the snook thing, you said saw six snook early morning today, which was the last time they were really biting. I'm wondering if you went back at the same exact time. I actually just put a video out about this, how the tide shifts, an hour from day to day, 50 minutes to an hour. So if you went back there at the same time, you might be an hour, what would it be, an hour early or an hour late to when they were biting last time. And from what I've seen with snook, they're very picky when it comes to the timing and the tide cycle, it seems like. Do you see that, Peter? Like there's just like a certain time during the tide cycle where they really go off, and then a certain time they really shut off.
Yeah. So snook, they do like water movement. It's important that you have a little bit of water movement, but making long casts, it's really hard to sight fish a snook. You want to fish the fish before the fish knows you're there, especially fishing artificials. So make long casts in those areas. If you know the snook are there, stay way off and make long casts and make repetitive casts. It might take a dozen casts before that fish wants to bite. So, early mornings are always best, regardless of the tide. But like Tony was saying, the current is going to be an hour later, almost exactly every day. You can forecast tides, 2 years out, and it's an hour later every day. So early and late is going to be best. And then if you want to match that tide, if you're in a spot that's peculiar to that tide, like it needs to be high for this fish to bite, then just look at the tide tables. Look at your smart fishing spot if that happened, and try to match it up and just, make mental note of that. And then with the jig head, most of the time with a lure that's going by a fish, the color isn't that important. I do notice that chartreuse is, I know it's kind of overplayed, but it triggers something in snook particularly that really gets the bite. So when I'm using jig heads, I'll use the unpainted, the lead. I'll use white or chartreuse, and those are my favorite colors. And I use jig heads a lot when snook fishing. If you look at like a snook's favorite food, like a croaker or a big shrimp, which are the two. I mean, we caught some 40-inch snook the other day, and I assume they were feeding on big pogies that were close by. When I got them in, they were throwing up dozens of shrimp. I didn't know there was shrimp in the river this time of year. And the shrimp, and they were white shrimp. Now, white shrimp's tails are chartreuse. They're super chartreuse. And a croaker's fin, when they're fresh, after you catch them using for bait, you won't see it. But if you get a fresh croaker, their fins are super chartreuse. And so I just noticed that that's a pretty good color. So I also use a lot of unpainted jig heads too. So that's kind of what I would lean on. I think you're kind of fishing the right thing. And sometimes they don't bite. Maybe a dolphin came through right before you got there. Somebody else ran them over with your boat. It's really hard to say why they didn't bite one day and not the next. But, going back, fishing early is going to be best, and making long casts, trying to stay out as far as you can from where you're standing.
Good stuff. So I'm on the next one. It's asking about Cast King bait cast reels. Do I recommend them, and do they backlash? So you can backlash any bait caster you got. Hang up on the landing net on a cast or something, and I promise you that sucker. But Cast King, all right. I'm I'm not brand loyal to anybody, and I'm not going to pull punches. So here you go. They used to be the worst brand, and they are no longer the worst brand, but they're still not good. Okay. They've made vast improvements. They've got a few that are quality. But as far as if you want to know what I recommend, the big four always, Daiwa, Shimano, Luz, Abu Garcia. They all make good stuff. Cast King is not in that category. And if you need baitcaster for under $100, then maybe Cast King can come into the conversation. But honestly, guys, like, I know skills matter more than your equipment. There's no debate on that. But your equipment matters. And I wouldn't, if you take fishing seriously, I certainly would not compromise on any of my gear. And as a bait caster with spinning reels, your reel matters a little bit less than what it does when you have a bait caster. A bait caster, that quality of that reel matters, and it's going to affect your fishing a lot. You can get by with a mediocre type of spinning reel and compete at the high level. A low quality bait caster is it's going to cost you. And so I would definitely spend my money on a good name brand. And again, not bashing Cast King, but you want an unbiased opinion and truthful answer. So there it is.
So around that $100 price range, would you even recommend him going to maybe the Daiwa Fuego CT instead?
Yeah, so there's $200 reels that you'll hear me recommend. We have one of them in the Fish Strong store. The Daiwa Fuego is new, and it's proven to be very, very good. It's highly durable, and we're fishing saltwater guys, and the bait casters are a lot less durable than the spinning reels are as far as saltwater resistance. It's impossible to seal a bait caster just with the inherent design of them, and so the Daiwa Fuego is really good. Another one, and we don't carry this one, but I'm going to go ahead and give you unbiased opinions. The Shimano SLX is also really good. I think it's like 109, 119 or whatever. It's a $20 bill or whatever higher than the Fuego, but that's a high performing reel. That's a lot of quality for $100. So that I would stay away from Cast King and get one of the lower end Shimanos or Daiwas for sure.
Or just get a spinning reel.
Or you could just stay with the spinning. I knew that was coming. Anybody on the offshore wreck reef pointers?
I was going to throw that one to Peter. We just had an anonymous question comes in. Offshore wreck or reef. They're looking for hints and pointers on how to fish them. What do you got?
First, start off with good locations. So you want to have good GPS coordinates. Reefs are always great for numbers of fish. If you're looking for like triggerfish, things like that. If you want bigger fish like amberjack, cobia, you want to focus more, bigger red snapper, you want to focus more on your wrecks. The deeper, usually the better. But it's really hard to. A chicken rig is if you want numbers of fish. A chicken rig drop like heavy enough weight to get you to the bottom, keep your line tight. 2 hooks, 2 small circle hooks. And cut squid, that's going to catch you triggerfish, vermilion snapper, lane snapper, anything like that. That's a great go-to. And then if you want to catch the bigger, smarter fish, I recommend using a longer leader, like maybe even up to like 15, 20 feet from your weight. Use a weight heavy enough to get you on the bottom, 15, 20 feet. Live bait fish, like a live pilchard, sardine, grunt, something like that. A lot of people kind of go right in the middle. They'll use a 2-foot leader weight that's really not heavy enough to get you to the bottom. So you got a lot of like play. Your bait drifts off the reef or the wreck. And you're not going to get the smarter fish. You're not going to get the smaller fish. So most of the charter captains I know that are reef wreck fishermen, they got some anglers using the chicken rigs, and they got a couple people throwing down the bigger stuff. And now you got everything pretty much covered. But I hope that helps you out. It's kind of, you can go anywhere with that question.
Yeah, and definitely look at smart fishing spots where you have the shaded relief. You also have the reef locations on there. And what I tell a lot of people to do is use those reef locations as like a starting point because they put those reefs on hard bottom. So there's other structure nearby. So if you're looking at the shaded relief, you might notice there's a bunch of, ledges or humps or something just off of that reef. Go fish that spot because most people are hammering those reefs. So if you can find something that's close by, you may increase your chances of getting on some good fish. And I know Luke likes to drop prawns down on the bottom, on a jig head, just jigging them on the bottom. That does really well too. And we've come to the theory that a lot of those fish don't see that out there. So if they're not going after live bait, you might want to try our artificial, just dumping it along the bottom, jigging it along the bottom. Never know what you'll get down there. All right, next one this is from Alex. This is a good one for pretty much all of us. But what general areas will you start to target during the summer to fall transition? What you got, Peter?
Oh boy.
No specific areas, just general.
Just in general, you're going to notice there's going to be a lot of mullet movement that time of year. You're going to start getting tropical storms, hurricanes. The water level is going to come up regardless where you live. Water's going to get dirtier. And so I really start to focus on bait fish, mullet. And so whether you're fishing the beaches, the inlets, the passes, the river spades, mullet is going to be what you're going to look for to find those game fish. And so that's kind of and you want to mimic and replicate that. So I'll use live mullet for bait, and I'll use a lot of slam shadies or topwater plugs. And so that's going to be kind of, regardless of where I would fish, that's what I would focus on.
Good stuff. Yeah, for big redfish, what would you say? Would you rather fish when we're getting into that sort of spawning season? Do you find more fish like in the inlets or the passes, or more like flats or still in the bays?
So I was thinking about this last week. I was talking to my clients about it. So the big giant redfish, they're going to return to where they were born, spawn. And just it's built into them to return to that area. Now that's for all of them. So the small redfish are going to do the same thing. So you're going to notice, like, let's say the Indian River, for instance, during the spring, you might not see many redfish anywhere. And come the end of September, October, November, we're going to be flooded with redfish. I mean, Grant, Melbourne, I'm just talking about areas where I live. We'll see no redfish hardly at all, South Melbourne, Grant, Sebastian. And then come the fall, these slot-sized redfish, 30-inch redfish, they just flood the areas. And we catch piles of them where we didn't catch them a month before. And so regardless of the size, they're going to come in the fall. The great big redfish, they're going to come in down. They're going to go down the beaches. And they're going to go in the passes. So the first place you're going to see them is the passes up north. So you're going to see in Florida, you're going to see like Jacksonville, and then you're going to see, and then it's going to come down. It'll be like Ponce Inlet, then Sebastian, then Port Canaveral. They're going to come down. And so if you want to pay attention to reports, when you see people starting to catch them in Jacksonville, you're going to be able to start catching them in the inlets in St. Augustine. And then you're going to be able to catch them in Ponce. Then you're going to catch them at Port Canaveral. So I'll pay attention to that. If I see people starting to catch those fish in the inlets up there, I know they're coming in. Once they come in, then they're going to move into the river systems. And so really the end of September is when we'll start to see the first groups of big redfish in Mosquito Lagoon that come in through Ponce, and they'll come in the river. So really like October is probably my favorite month to fish for the big redfish, early November. But the big ones, you want to be where they're at. You can fish the beaches for them. You can fish the inlets and passes, and you can also fish the flats for them. There are ocean schools on both the West Coast and East Coast that stay close to the beach, usually in like 20 feet of water, 15, 20 feet of water. They'll be on bait pods, and they'll stay there. They were probably born out there. They probably came into the lagoons, and theirs are like ocean exclusive fish. And then you'll have fish that come in and spawn in the river itself. And so at the same time, you can catch those fish out off the beach, and you can also catch them in the river. So leading into that, you'll watch it trickle south, then you'll watch in the spring, you'll watch them winter, you'll watch them start trickling back to the north. So pay attention to reports just north of you, and then you'll know they're coming. Start fishing on the beaches and passes, and then you can kind of follow them into the rivers. But places like Flubber Canal, the bridges, those are good corridors. They're going to funnel those migrating fish, and they're going to stick around and they're going to feed too. So instead of looking on the open flats, which sometimes takes a long time to locate the fish because they move around a lot, focusing on those areas that are going to concentrate those fish as they move through. And they'll stage for a little bit. They'll feed on all the crabs and the other bait fish and crustaceans that are flowing through those areas. So those are kind of my favorite areas to focus on big redfish.
The same here. We've got Sabine and Galveston. It typically happens first, late September, and then by November, it's all the way down to Port Isabel. And it's doing the same thing. It's working from north to south. Ours are always, I mean, if you want the big bulls, it's going to be on the beachfront and in the jetties and passes for us, at least. That's where the big ones are going to be. And I mean, pretty much like you said, it's all about that bait. But the north to south thing is very noticeable here. Like Sabine will get the big bulls moving in the pass and at the beach like a whole month before like Corpus down will get them. And so that's very noticeable here. It's cool to see that it's the same on the East Coast and West Coast of Florida too.
Good stuff, guys. All right, next one from Kenny. What type of rod tip is needed to fish the skinny lipper the best? Tried using a soft tip and was embarrassed because I couldn't get it to act like on your videos. Had my first kayak fishing trip with a guy and told him I had the best lure ever, but failed to use it properly. Operator error. So with the skinny lipper, there's sort of a trick to getting it to start running right. And what I do is when it lands in the water, I'll tighten up my line and do a couple reels just to get it under the surface of the water, and then I'll start twitching and getting a retrieve going. I say it kind of primes your line in the water. You know, if your line's too slack and you go to retrieve that lure, it's not going to have the right action. But when it comes to the rod tip, I use a fast rod tip for pretty much everything I'm throwing. And again, it comes down more to the person actually using it, you know, waiting for that lure to settle in the water. If you start retrieving it too quick, it's just going to probably skip on the surface, which you may be seeing, and it's not getting just under the surface like it should. So again, tighten up that line and just do slight twitches with the rod, you know, all in the wrist. Don't do a big, you know, swing of the rod or try to be too aggressive with it. It's just got to be a subtle pop, let it float up. Again, tighten up that line and pop it again.
Kenny G, I love your music, bro. So I agree 100%. I think a fast action or an extra fast action on something like any type of hard bait that you're twitching, an erratic action. I like something with a little more stiffness to it. Did you two other guys have any input on that? I know rods are a lot of preference, but still.
Using a lure like that for me and topwaters, use fast action, something stiff. You want to be able to control it with small movements. So with a stiff tip, you can sit there and go like little 1 inch, and you, especially with braided line, you get a lot of movement out of the lure. Soft tip, monofilament line, you have to do a lot of stuff to get that lure to move right.
Yeah.
Now, there is one advantage, I will say, if you have a softer tip and, say, treble hooks. You have a tendency to pin the fish. You know, you'll catch the fish because that rod has a little bit more flex. Monofilament has a little more give, so you're less likely to pull the hook out. But if you're used to a fast action and you know how to fight a fish, it's easier to work that lure with a fast action, and you'll have just as good of a catch ratio, an actual landing the fish ratio. But if you're brand new with a hard bait, you might land more fish, but it's gonna be harder to work the lure. So it's a give and take. I pretty much, like Tony, I'm almost fast action with everything.
Yeah, you see a lot of bass fishermen, they have a different rod for almost every technique, every lure out there. I like to have the same rod, the same feel for everything I'm using. And what I adjust is how I work that lure. You know, you may have to back off a little bit. You may have to adjust how you're, you know, twitching the rod tip and things like that. But I want that rod to feel the same no matter what lure I'm using.
I'll throw this next one at you here, Peter. This one's from John Fortune. It says, Peter, great to see you on here. I hear you talk about circle hooks and octopus hooks. What's the difference, and how and why do you choose one versus the other? Also, what size and style hook do you prefer when using cut bait? Thanks.
Oh, So an octopus hook is kind of a modified J hook. So it's a little bit like a circle hook in that it's a J hook, but the tip's going to point in just a little bit. And then you've got a circle hook, which obviously comes all the way around. Now, if you have to set the hook, you can't use a circle hook. So you're going to use an octopus hook. There's a lot of times you need to set the hook on a fish. So if you're going to tail hook a bait like a mullet, or if you're fishing snook that are facing at you and they're charging you, so a lot of times they'll flip like nose hook mullet around docks and things like that. They're going to fight. You need to set the hook and come tight fast. So you can't use a circle hook. And now those regular J hooks or an octopus hook is what I prefer to use because you got to really get in that fish. If I'm going to fish, like today we fished around the jetties in Sebastian and we use circle hooks because the fish are going to bite the bait. They're going to turn away. You don't want to gut hook the fish. The benefit to a circle hook, once it's in the fish, it's going to stay in the fish 99% of the time. On a J hook, a lot of times the fish will come off, and you have potentially could hook the fish deep. Whereas on the circle hook, you got to reel into the fish, but it's going to stay in when you get it. You want to match the hook size to the bait, and a little bit to the fish size. So I find myself for like red fishing, cut bait, I'll use a 4-aught, sometimes a 5-aught. If you go too small, a lot of times they'll come out of the bigger fish. They'll just kind of miss their lips. And you want to match the fish structure of their mouths too. So like we were fishing really big snook today. I was using 4 and 5-aught circle hooks. If I went to a 3-aught, it wouldn't make it around the bone. It would just hit it and pop out or maybe hook a little bit of the lip. So you kind of want to match it to the size of the fish a little bit. But the average size snook, you just want to kind of match it to the size of the bait.
Actually, a great question.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
All right. Johnny B has a question of the day. East Florida or West Florida has better fishing? So for me personally, I think West Florida has more areas to fish. East Florida has better fish. I've caught bigger fish on the East Coast than the West Coast. Me personally, I don't know about you guys. What do you think?
It's whatever coast I'm on at the moment. I think they're both equally. It's a different experience. I'm not going to say one's better than the other. They're just different opportunities. So, because I fish the Mosquito Lagoon, North Indian River, I do like going over to the West Coast because it is something different. But, if I had to put a fish in the boat just because it's home waters, I'm going to go over on the east side, but I like them both.
I'm partial to where I live. If you look at the records, it's like size of fish. We have technically larger fish over here, but there's massive fish on the West Coast too. And like you said, every area is beautiful. There's way more places to fish on the West Coast, but there's a lot more people that fish over there with the major cities. So there's a trade-off. You fish areas in like Jacksonville, there's smaller creeks and area like not that much river, but you tend to not see that many people out there. So regardless of where you fish, there's great fishing everywhere.
Yeah. And it also has to come down to what you want to fish for. So if I had to, get flounder for dinner, I'm fishing Jacksonville. I mean, those creeks up there, they're going to produce more flounder. So a lot of it has to do with really, what is your favorite fish to fish and how do you like fishing for it? I love redfish. That's my favorite fish to catch. And I love catching tailing redfish. And I see more of those on the East Coast than I ever do on the West Coast. So also it might just be influential on your style and what your preference is on the way you want to catch them.
Yeah, good answer.
Yeah, I'll throw this one at you, Captain. This one's from Ken. He says, St. Lucie River water is really murky. I've been told it's not dirty or silty, but more like stained brown by the mangroves. Either way, it seems like it would be hard for fish to see anything in that water. How much is visual versus sensory, sound, smell, and vibration? And how does that affect bait selection in murky water?
Good question. In the St. Lucie, most of that water is coming out of Lake Okeechobee, which is tan. It's got tannic acid in there, so it's stained red, but it's clear. There are times when the water is actually dirty from sediment. So is it you want to pay attention to it and look. Areas where it's stained dark, it's still clear. The fish can still see very well in it. Or if it's really turbid from a lot of wind blowing into a shoreline and it picks up the mud and the sediment and the water is really dirty, the fish can't see it all. So in that situation, they're going to be very touch, feel, sensory. Just because it's dark, they can use their eyes a lot. You want to be careful in areas where it's really turbid and a lot of sediment. The fish, they're not sure if your bait is going to be predator or prey. And so I like to use a much slower retrieve. It's not necessarily so they have more time to see it, but they can kind of feel it and sense that it's something small coming at them than you would if it was clear water. Clear water, you want to go kind of faster so they don't have as much time to look at it and see that there's a hook and a line and it's an artificial lure. So just work a little bit slower. But yeah, pay attention to it. If you're not catching fish and the water seems dirty and turbid, the fish might not be there. And a lot of times too, those fish they'll either gravitate to that water or they'll gravitate away from it. So if you're in the St. Lucie, you got a lot of that water, especially in the summer and fall, it's going to get dirtier and dirtier, darker and darker. And it could push a lot of those fish out of there, but it also could attract a lot of fish. So if you're not seeing fish, maybe go find some saltier, clearer water. And if you're catching a lot of fish, maybe venture more up into that because you're going to see more of them.
All right, next one from Tony. What artificial baits work well on the East Florida jetties? For me personally, I like to use bigger swim baits and paddle tails. Anything from 5 to 6 inch paddle tails on jig heads works really good. Flare hawk jigs if you're going after snook, and even redfish like in Sebastian area, those are like the staple out there. How you retrieve them is really going to be the make or break of getting those fish to bite. One day they might just want a straight retrieve. A lot of people don't think about just doing a straight retrieve with a bucktail or a flare hawk jig. They typically think it's a jig, I got to bounce it. Not always the case. They do what's called like sweeping the bottom. So you basically make a cast and let the current drag your line, and your lure is going to make sort of like a quarter circle along the bottom. So it's going to sweep, as I say, along the bottom, cover a lot more water that way. If you're bouncing bottom around Florida jetties, you're going to lose a lot of lures. I usually come stacked with probably 24 jigs when I'm going out. But yeah, those flare hawk jigs, paddle tails, and the prawn lures, the shrimp lures, those work really good. It's just a matter of getting that lure in the strike zone, especially if you have a lot of current. You want to make sure you have the right amount of weight so it's getting down where those fish are at, but also you're not getting hung up every cast. So you got to sort of fine tune that.
Captain Peter Deeks, what do you think about that? You got any input on some East Coast jetty fishing with lures?
You really want to match the hat still in the fall. I agree with Tony. You want to use a lot of paddle tails, big paddle tails, like a 4-inch slim shady. Fish it on the bottom. The key to fishing inlets and passes, you need to be on the bottom. If you fish up high, you get jacks and bluefish. But if you want big redfish, big snook, which is kind of what we're focusing on around inlets and passes, you want to be on the bottom. So make sure you have enough weight to get down there. Slow retrieve. So you want to, this is kind of about it. And then you want to pause and feel your jig hit the bottom pretty quick. Reel it up pretty quick. So I'll reel it about like this. Don't do a lot of rod popping. Steady retrieve. You want your bait right along the bottom, just coasting along. The current's going fast. Like Tony was saying, you're going to cast out. Whether you're in a boat or from shore, you're going to cast up current a little bit, make a long cast, and it's going to sweep through. So your bait's going to kind of approach the fish sideways. So it's going to come at them, and it's going to sweep by down on the bottom. If you're not getting snagged, you're not on the bottom. So you want to be on the bottom. If you're getting snagged too much, you're probably in a rocky area, and you're not going to find that there's that many fish there. The snook and the redfish are going to be laying on sand, a lot of times close to rocks, but they're not going to be on rocks. That's like mangrove snapper and grouper and sheep's head. So you want to find an area where it's sandy. So maybe like a 30-yard stretch is hard sand, and maybe there's rocks on either side. So if you're getting snagged a bunch, move and find a different area to cast. You shouldn't be getting snagged every cast. But yeah, keep it down there on the bottom. My go-to is going to be the prawn. You're going to see the popularity of shrimp lures, especially in the passes from Miami up to Jacksonville. That's like what everybody's using right now. At daytime, small. Use like a little 3-inch shrimp. Get it down there on the bottom and just retrieve it super slow. You don't have to entice the fish. The fish isn't following it. The strike zone on the fish is like that. So that bait just is going to come through and it's going to bite it. And that fish is down there in that current. There's a lot going on. There's sand and there's other fish and seaweed drifting by, and it's facing the current. Stuff's coming at them. And then here comes a little shrimp. and they're going to eat it. So it's not like a big fish in an aquarium. You got to work that lure just right. Just steady retrieve, maybe a pop every now and again, and then just let it sit on the bottom. Retrieve it maybe 10 feet, nice and slow, and retrieve it. But you can't go wrong with the prawn. I usually use the white color, and make sure you have a heavy enough lead. And like Tony was saying, you're just going to sweep it along. Once it gets down current of you, I like to reel it in real fast. You're going to get almost all of your strikes straight out in front of you or a little bit up current. I rarely will get one down current because now you're retrieving your bait to the tail of the fish. So the snook and redfish are facing in the current. Once it gets down current, you're going to reel it into the tail and it's going to spook the fish. So it's really easy and very effective, and it's getting a lot of popularity both in the day and night. But larger baits at night, smaller baits during the day, and lighter leader during the day. You can get away with some heavy leader at night.
Now, when you say lighter, what are you talking about? Like, say, in the Sebastian Inlet, what's on the small side?
I mean, you might have to drop down to like 25 and you break off a bunch of fish if the water's really clear. You'll see, a lot of times at Sebastian, if it's clear, you're going to see the fish in the daytime, and they're going to be against the rocks. And you see a lot of people. I saw them there today and all year. But, you might drop down to like a short piece, maybe like 18 inches or even less, 12 inches of maybe like 30 pound. And maybe have a long section of like 15 or 20, and it's finesse fishing. You're going to catch look downs and ladyfish and snappers and other stuff, but just a little tiny 2 or 3 inch little shrimp lure. You put on the bottom and just nice and slow. You're not trying to spook the fish, and eventually you're going to reel that past 100 snook before one wants to bite it. Whereas at night they're just feeding. They're going to spread out. So in the day the fish are really schooled up in a couple of areas. And they're really, they're protecting each other. So they're stacked, hundreds of fish together. If one gets spooked, the whole school will spook and they'll part, and that lure will go right through them. And then at night, they all spread out across the bottom. That's when it's easy. We're throwing those big flare hawk jigs like Tony was talking about. There's really not a lot of finesse about it. Just something that's not seaweed, it's not a shark, and it's moving through nice and slow. That fish is going to bite it.
You ever something we do in Texas at the jetties is we like to throw like deep diving crankbaits and kind of clack those off the rocks. The redfish love those. I don't know if that's something you ever experimented with or not.
I've done good doing that in Jacksonville on the jetties. I've done really well using that technique. Further south, it's not as good. I just think fishing pressure, the fish go smarter.
I'll grab that next question from Paul. Any tips for Charleston Harbor, Wando River? Went out for the first time last week, really hot air and water temps, but had zero luck on game fish hitting many of the different hot spots. So it might be, without knowing exactly what you did, you want to make sure and check the hot spots that are really following the trends. So wind-blown points, you want to be something that's going to have a variation from shallow water to deep water, that these fish can move up shallow to feed. And then whenever those water temperatures warm up, they can go down in the shortest amount of time into some deeper water, wait out that that hot water in that whatever tide cycle. But wind, just wind-blown points is what I would look at. And also, I'm going to be looking for areas that's closer to open water. So something that's closer to the harbor itself, or something that's closer to the ocean and not further back in the river. Now, there's going to be fish, back further in the river, but this time of year, you're going to have more of them, especially your larger fish, your breeding size fish. They're going to move out. They're going to want that higher salinity. Your water is going to be cooler out there. There's typically going to be more bait out there. So look for those types of areas. And again, without knowing exactly what you did, just looking at the map, I'm going to use that wind to my advantage. You might want to try fishing, not sure when you were fishing, fish those twilight periods. So whether that be first thing in the morning, even before the sun comes up, or right as that sun is going down. What a lot of people don't realize is whenever that sun goes down, the shallower water is going to drop in temperature quicker than deeper water. So fish will move up shallower as that sun's coming down. So you might want to change the time of the day if you've been out there in the middle of the day. And by the answer to your question there, it says really hot air and water temps. It's tough. I mean, August is tough in the middle of the day. I'm not going to lie. I'm usually off the water by 10:30. So, if that might be the issue, try a different time of day, and I bet you probably have some better luck.
All right. So, What's the best area to find nighttime flounder for a walking gigger in the Corpus Christi, Port Aransas, and Rockport area this time of year when it's hot? Okay, you're going to find those in the vast open sand flats. Okay, some muddy flats as well, but mostly the sandy flats. And just to keep this answer quick, so we're not talking spots all day long. Carl, if you want to shoot me a message, I'll drop you pins on 5 or 6 spots that you can go flounder gigging around your area if you want to do that. I don't know that I could do that in this format, and me playing around on the map right now is going to take up too much time. But Carl, shoot me a message on the platform, on the community platform, and I'll get you some spots for flounder gigging. Okay. All right. The next one, I'm 2 in a row. So I'm looking at smart spots for the Corpus Christi area, and I found that the major solunar periods seldom have the higher strike scores. So why so much emphasis on the solunar periods? All right, so let's give a quick breakdown of what these solunar periods are. Solunar periods, major and minor feeding periods. When the moon is directly overhead and when the moon is directly underfoot, that's a major feeding period. And when the moon is rising and when the moon is setting, that is a minor feeding period. And we touched on them earlier, guys. They are very, very important. Now, the strike score has a ton of factors that go into that. And when you say you're from Corpus, that means that you probably have a whole lot of wind. And wind is one of those factors that can take that strike score and knock it down. Now, the only problem with that, now, Smart Fishing Spots has done the best they can with that. We've got an algorithm in there, and it works very well, and it's decently accurate. The only problem is that like our local fish, just like us fishermen, we've pretty much adapted to this wind. They see under 10 miles an hour almost never. And so just because the strike score is getting a negative score on it because of the excessive wind doesn't mean that the fish aren't going to bite that day. Okay. So, there's other factors that are pulling that, strike score down, even though there's a major feeding period at that time. We kind of touched on those major feeding periods progressing through the day. So a lunar day is actually, 24 hours and 50 minutes. Okay. And actually it's 24 hours and 48 minutes to 24 hours and 52 minutes, depending on if the moon is in apogee or perigee, which meaning the moon is, orbit is in an ellipse. And when it's closer to Earth in the orbit, then that day is actually shorter. It's kind of like a racetrack, the car going around the inside of it. Okay. The moon is traveling at the same speed, but when it's taking a tighter turn, it's closer to Earth, then that actual lunar day will be shorter. So you'll notice, like if you have on those, lunar charts, it'll be, you look at it and you're like, why the heck is it 47 minutes? Well, the moon is in perigee. Or why is it 53 minutes instead of 50 minutes exactly? The moon is in apogee at that time. Okay, so that kind of gives you maybe a little extra information that was unwarranted there, but I nerd out on the astronomy stuff, so kind of wanted to cover that lunar day and that type of thing. But basically, what's happening is the gravitational pull. And its direction on the fish is the reason that it's triggering those bites. And that's why it's called a major feeding period and a minor feeding period, is because of the direction of the gravitational pull. Okay. Hopefully that answered your question. Anybody else have anything they want to throw in on that? It's not necessarily 100%.
Man, what a great explanation of what that is. That is.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's cool. I'll bet you 95% everyone that watched this, like they know kind of a little bit, but they learned something. Cool.
Did you learn something right there, Peter?
I did.
Awesome.
A lot of words there I've never heard before in my life.
Yeah, I'm sitting here Googling, like, what is that? I got to say it.
I am a product of the. I am a product of the Florida public school system, so those words were, kind of they're way out there. So, but just to kind of add on, like as far as strike scores and the majors and minors, Captain actually, he alluded on this earlier. You want to be at your best spot during those majors and minors, but you still want to fish the trends. So, when it's 95 degrees outside, these fish are going to feed better in those low light conditions. So if you can line up a major or minor period during that twilight, whether it be morning or whether it be evening, you want to be in your best spots. Now, if you are forced to fish during the day, then you still want to be in your best spots whenever that major, that minor happens, where you've seen those fish before. But in between, you can go out and hunting, and trying to find them. But it's trends first, major, minor, second, third down the list.
Absolutely. And there's things that can trump that. I mean, like, if you got a weather system moving in or something, and it's in the middle of a storm during the major feeding period, like, not that you can't catch fish in a storm, but before the storm and after the storm is typically where it's at. Right. And so the bite may be an hour off of that simply because you've got 5 or 6 other factors coming in, nothing in fishing is 100%. Nothing in fishing is black and white. Okay. It's not like math, guys, where it's always the same answer when you plug in the same numbers. Okay. So there is a lot of factors to consider. But the major and minor feeding periods, the solunar tables, are very important. Okay. I know we kind of beat this one up, but they are very important. Don't sleep on those. You want to fish those majors.
Right, we're getting close to 8 o'clock, so we're going to do a little sort of speed round here, go through these questions that are left. The next one's from Anonymous for Peter, getting ready for the East Coast mullet run. What's your preference for tarpon bait if you're not using live mullet? Artificials, ? And tide times, etc. Do you catch more fish on the inlets, flats, or beach?
So you're gonna find your numbers of bigger fish on the beach following the big black mullet schools. So run the beach, or if you're fishing from shore, go to boardwalk till you see them. You're not going to see scattered tarpon necessarily. They're going to be following these big black mullet schools. So it look like a big, maybe 100-yard section of black water going through, and they're striped mullet, and they're usually like 8 to 12 inches long. You see them flipping and jumping, and that's tarpon to follow that. Match to hatch, big swim bait, big slam shady, jig head, throw it out there a bunch of times to get a strike. You usually aren't going to throw it out there and they're going to jump all over. There's a lot of competition. Those fish are feeding on this mullet. Mid-sized tarpon, fish in the river systems, 6-7 feet deep of water, run around so you see them rolling. Also paddle tail. And then the small fish, they're back in the creeks and they're going to be feeding on the smaller mullet. That's a fun time to throw like a little jerk bait, paddle tail, topwater plugs. And that's, kind of super fun. But yeah, further in you move, the smaller the fish, further out, bigger the fish. Move around until you find them. They breathe air, the tarpons, so they roll like dolphins. So make sure you see the fish to catch the fish.
All right, this next one, we're trying to move through these fast, so I'm gonna try to throw this out there real quick. We know live bait works when you know where the fish are. What strategies do you suggest when you're getting into a transition period, such as fall, when fish are a bit everywhere? So that is kind of what happens. The fish are kind of transitioning through to their winter spots, and fall is sort of an in-betweensy, and you basically are. I only fish artificials most of the time. It's very seldom for me to throw live bait. I use a search bait, something like a soft plastic that can be fished multiple water columns. If you're trying to figure out that bite and find fish, you don't want to waste time. All right. So efficiency matters during times like that. Efficiency matters a lot. Be able to cover multiple water columns, be able to work that lure at different speeds, be able to, quick change of profiles, things like that. And I think the soft plastic fits that bill. As far as finding fish, for us in Texas, I'm going to speak for us in Texas, but you typically are very close to where your spring spots are. Okay. Before summertime. After summertime is very similar. And again, they're, instead of coming out of for trout, for example, instead of coming out of the back bays in the back country up towards the surf, they're moving back towards the back country. And so anytime you've got like a hot spot where you've got 3 or 4 things, we talk about the ABCs of finding a spot. Bait is huge in the fall. Okay. We have, in Texas, I really only know a lot about Texas, so don't get me speaking on any other states, but, we have a shrimp hatch. And, so the shrimp are coming out of the back marshes. That's a good strategy right there is to kind of find the shrimp. That's where your fish are going to be. Anyone else have anything you want to throw on that one?
I was going to say, find the bait, find the fish, and pay attention to what the bait's doing. There could be a lot of bait fish out there, but you could have one school of bait that's tightly packed and showering at the surface and getting spooked. Then you might have another bait fish school that's kind of just chilling. Fish the active bait fish schools, the ones that look like they've got something going after them or something nearby. All right, next question from Rob. Here's a question about rods. Been following and paying attention to the boys at Mudhole. Does anyone have any negative or positive opinion on these gents? Getting interested in building my own custom rod. Anyone recommend another organization? Anyone have a favorite rod guides brand? So Mudhole, we worked with them in the past. They were great. I know Luke, Pat, did you go to that rod building class too, or was that?
No, I did not. That's an addiction I don't want to get into.
Yeah, I believe they had a rod building class, and they had a bunch of people, some insiders did it too, where they built some rods, and never heard anything negative about them. I'm not sure of any other companies personally. And as far as rod guides, Fuji is like the staple out there. They have many different levels of rod guides. You can get your basic ceramic rod guides, then you have like Torzite, and you have all these other harder material that the guides are made out of to be number one, harder, and also smoother, so better casting. So it depends on how much you want to spend with those. They can get pretty pricey. You can be paying like $200 for a pair or a set of rod guides. Yeah, so just keep that in mind.
Your rod guides are totally different too when you're talking about bait casters. When you're talking about spinning rods, like the recoil titaniums are great on a bait caster, and they're atrocious on a spinning setup. So there's a lot to consider. The rod building world is a deep rabbit hole, brother. Good luck. Have fun.
Yeah. Post that question in the community too, Rob. We have got a lot of builders in the community that could probably point you in some other directions other than mud holes. So that'd be a good community question. I'll grab this next one from David. Do you guys know anything about Little River, South Carolina inlet fishing? Yeah, I've fished up there before. It does fish, like any other inlet where you've got your main channel that moves in and out. We're going to start seeing, right about now. I know in North Carolina and the Pamlico Sound, the big reds are moving them right now. You're probably maybe another 2 or 3 weeks out from that happening. But personally, if I was fishing that area right now, I would go back up into the ICW and fish the creeks up that way, because it's loaded with flounder this time of year. Just get out there in the mouths of those creeks and those drains, wait for an outgoing tide, and they'll stack up right at the mouths of those drains, and the fish can get really good. And good thing about South Carolina is you can actually keep your flounder, not like North Carolina. But it fishes that whole area just fishes like a lot of the other inlets and passes. It's going to be seasonal depending on what you want. Also, I'm not sure what you're fishing out of. What I did, I took my kayak up there, and I actually went all the way in the backs of these creeks at the bottom end of low tide, where there was no water left in those creeks. And basically the redfish, they're going to pull out of the marshlands, and they're going to go in just enough water, for them to sustain, and they're going to wait for that tide cycle, and they'll be pulled up in some of those deeper holes. And honestly, it can be like fishing in a barrel, but again, you need a kayak to do that. So I'm not really sure what you're fishing, but that whole area is great.
And next one from Rodney. How big of a factor should salinity level be when developing a plan? How would someone find out what the salinity levels are, if they are even reported? So I don't factor it in too much, because if I'm fishing areas that are typically going to be connected to the Atlantic or the Gulf, and you're going to have salt water, what I find to be more of a factor is actually the pH level of the water, because certain pH levels, just like a fish tank, if the pH level's off, those fish are going to die, and what you're looking for is the bait that those fish are feeding on, and the bait can be sensitive to those pH levels. So if the bait's not there, if it's not a comfortable environment for the bait, the fish aren't going to be there either. So just keep that in mind. Salinity, I don't really look at it too much. You can get a little device that you just stick in the water, I believe, and it'll give you a reading. But I don't factor that in really when I'm coming up with a plan. You go to Bass Pro Shops, you see redfish in the same tank as largemouth bass. So they can still thrive in that, lower water salinity. But again, what's really going to come down to is the water comfortable for the bait fish. If it's too acidic or basic, pH levels off, that can really come into play.
I want to piggyback on that one real quick because we got salinity issues in my two bay systems, and Tony's answer is absolutely correct for, I would say, 90% of the Gulf and probably the entire East Coast. But Galveston and Sabine struggle with salinity, and redfish don't mind. But during the trout spawn, the trout are actually thriving on that certain salinity level. And you're not going to catch mature breeder-sized trout that are spawning in too low of salinity. And we struggle with that low salinity. And this is area specific, guys. My little niche of an area. So most areas don't struggle with the salinity like we do, so it's not a big deal. There is a website, NOAA, NOAA, that has an actual salinity like live map that you can look at, and you can kind of see it's not 100% accurate, but it'll give you a good kind of a color-coded map type thing of where that salinity is. And if you're targeting breeder-sized speckled trout, slot and above speckled trout, you absolutely want to stay away from certain salinity levels below about 15 parts per ppm, ppt, whatever it is. PPT, yeah, parts per trillion. And if you want, you can message me, and I can put that link to that website for you. I know we're trying to go fast, and there I go.
No problem. I'll grab this next one from Gerard. Good evening, guys. Living fish in Southeast Georgia, specifically Glenn County, Camden County. Do you have any tips and tricks for this coastal area? For sure, pier and bridge fishing. So, this time of year, it's, it doesn't matter if you're really fishing from shore, pier, or if you're in a boat or in a kayak. It's really the problem that you're going to have is you're going to have less water access, but you still want to fish the same types of areas. So we still want to fish, closer to open water, closer to cooler water, wind-blown points if we can. If we can, if we're planning our days out, if you've got, say, a week to plan, a trip out, like you can pick one of your days, pick the day where the pier and the access that you have, has, better tides. You say you have an incoming tide. I like an incoming tide when I'm shore fishing. It brings the fish closer to you. And if you got wind blowing on that pier, that's going to be your best bet. And as far as seasonality right now, when you get closer to the open water, that's where you're going to find your trout. You're going to find redfish. But just like, we've been saying, those big redfish are going to start coming in too. You're probably about maybe a month out, but Georgia sees some monsters out there too. Trust me. But fish close to those passes on your pier and your inlets, and definitely look for plan your days out if you can.
Next one from Oscar. Fishing drop-offs inshore. Is it like bass fishing? So fishing drop-off is fishing a drop-off. Doesn't matter if you're, bass fishing or fishing for redfish, snook. You're going to fish it pretty much the same way. I personally don't really fish in water deeper than 3 or 4 feet. So I'm not really fishing drop-offs too much. But when you do get into them, a jig head's going to be the best thing to use out there. Preferably something weedless, like the Haas weedless round eye or the weedless football, just to avoid any snags with structure. But the jig head's going to be best because it weighs the nose of the bait, so it dives down faster. If you're using like a weighted hook, like the Haas Helix hook, where the weight is on the shank of the hook, that lure isn't going to dive down as quickly or as fast. It's sort of going to glide down to the bottom. So the type of way you get it rigged up is going to affect the presentation of the lure. If you're fishing deeper, you want something that can get down quick, especially if you're fishing, heavy current and things like that.
Talking about fishing drop-offs and like bass fishing, sea trout fishing is almost identical to largemouth bass fishing when you're fishing drop-offs. Redfish, totally different. Snook are totally different. They're more structure-oriented. But if you fish like you do for bass, you use the rig that Tony was talking about. Use a jig head, smaller, like a little like a slam shady, and you fish those drop-offs, fish down near the bottom, you're going to catch sea trout kind of regardless of where you fish. So when I'm fishing for smaller sea trout, numbers of sea trout, I fish it just like I do largemouth bass, weighted jig head, and just let your baits work that drop-off.
No. Try different angles too, different approach at the drop-off. Sometimes you might get a strike if you're retrieving that lure going up the drop. Sometimes you may get a strike if you're retrieving in line with it, just going right along the edge of that drop. So if you're not getting strikes, try a different positioning. That could be a big factor too. And last question here from Barry. He watches birds a lot when on the water. Diving brown pelicans are his favorite to follow. They always point out redfish. Diving seagulls, unless they're cheater gulls, always give me fish. Question, which birds help you locate fish and how and why? For me personally, I like to find the wading birds. If you see a fish, not a fish, but you see a bird that's up against the shoreline in the mangroves, sort of just slowly walking around, 9 times out of 10, I find a redfish in close proximity. Sometimes they're following the redfish because that redfish will be swimming along and start spooking things up. So those wading birds I like to see. Pelicans, I'm not too much of a fan of. One thing I do notice about pelicans when they're flying overhead, you may see them sort of look down as they're flying. When they do that, they probably saw something. So it could be a school of redfish or black drum, or maybe just a single trout, a big trout out there. So keep an eye on what they're doing when they're flying, not necessarily diving down. About you guys, any bird advice?
I actually got to go ahead. I apologize. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I actually have a video coming out on birds and bird behavior, and this may be area specific because I haven't really seen a lot of other people in other areas talk about this. But there's basically 3 types of fish you're going to find underneath birds on the upper Texas coast of Texas. Gaff topsail catfish. I know that we don't want that one. And speckled trout and redfish. Okay. And you could tell by the bird's behavior of how they're moving and diving, of what type of predator fish is underneath there. If they commit from up high and dive deep down into the water, most of the time that's going to be speckled trout. If they stay very low the whole time, if they're staying 1 to 3 feet and they're just picking the whole time, that's typically redfish. If they stay high, swoop down, and then hover for a second and gingerly pick the bait out, that's typically gaff topsail catfish. So you can watch a flock of seagulls work in bait and be like, well, that's gaff top, and just keep rolling. Or, oh man, redfish over there, because you see where they're at and what they're doing. So you can kind of read these birds by their behavior. That's seagull specific and upper Texas coast. I don't know, maybe it's not upper Texas coast specific, but that's, I don't want to speak on Florida and you guys be like, that is totally wrong, Scott. But yeah, so
over here, I know they ospreys, they're big at pointing out where the trout are. They're usually going after trout. So if you see ospreys circling and diving, they're usually going after trout. So that's one bird I do see that sort of has a connection with the type of fish.
That's a good observation with the ospreys. They do eat a lot of big trout in that shallow water. But pay attention to what the pelicans especially are doing. If they're feeding on minnows, they're going to dive down, they're going to lift their head up, and they're going to shake it in. They're going to get minnows almost every time. The mullet they miss most of the time. And so you see them dive, pop right back up, take off, dive again. They're missing. You can tell that they're feeding on bigger mullet. So regardless of the kind of fish you're going to target, you want to pay attention to what the birds are feeding on to key you in on what you want to catch. So what I mean to say is, if the pelicans are feeding on little minnows, glass minnows, that's going to tell you that there's going to be, if it's deeper water, smaller trout. And if it's shallow, that's going to be the key for redfish. If they're feeding on open flats, they're diving in and they're missing almost every time. They're feeding on the mullet. And so that's where I'm going to fish for my sea trout, my bigger sea trout, and my bigger snook. So 2 to 3 feet of water, big pelicans diving. They're not getting their prey, feeding on big mullet. That's where I'm going to fish for my trout, my big trout, and my snook. Super shallow water, you see a lot of Titusville, the Indian River. Pelicans are going to dive against the bank, and then they're going to put their head up, and they're going to shake down the little minnows in their throat. They're going to get minnows every time. That's a great place to catch redfish. And so I'll really kind of fish pelicans a lot. But we have so many pelicans, they're always diving. I don't key in on them, but I pay attention to where they're diving and what they're feeding on.
Yeah, over here too, we have they're called spoonbills, the roseate spoonbills. And they look like flamingos from a distance. They're bright pink. And if I see one of those sort of walking along the shoreline, nosing around in the water, in the mud, same thing with the wading birds. I always notice that, go over there, and then 9 times out of 10, there's a redfish nearby.
I see it. We have those too, but I see it a lot with the ibis, the ones that do the little sweeping motion. Mm-hmm. Those are a good shorebird for us to find some redfish. or bait that would indicate redfish, I should say. Yeah. Good bird talk.
What about snowbirds? Do you guys fish those areas?
Plenty of those in Florida.
Stay away from those spots.
We
Alrighty.
we don't let those come into Texas.
But you call them winter Texans.
I guess that's it, huh?
Yep.
Yeah, that's all the questions. So thanks again, Peter, for jumping on the call with us today.
Guys, it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me on, and hope I help some people out there. If you guys have a question, again, you can kind of write me a message or shoot me an email or text. Be happy to help you out.
Yep. I don't know how busy your schedule is, but I'm sure a lot of insiders tried to book some trips with you.
Booking trips is hard, but answering questions, I'm always here to help.
Yeah, for sure. Any courses working on or any ideas of stuff coming?
Yeah, we're working on and finishing up the underwater course, which is going to be really cool. Working really hard on that for years now. Just trying to make it great, but it's showing the game fish and some bait fish, but mostly game fish underwater in their natural behavior, unmolested, and in popular fishing areas too. So like piers, bridges, inlets, passes, river, docks, like where are the fish in relation to the bottom? And it's really cool. You see it, you could explain it, you could do 100 seminars, but to actually see it firsthand, you learn so much more. So I think it'll be a really good course.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. All right, guys. Well, that will wrap it up. As always, if you have any questions throughout the week or weekend, or it could be 2:00 in the morning, pops into your head, make sure you post those questions in the community. We'll be sure to answer them. We've got our weekend game plans going out, so look forward to those if you're able to get out on the weekend. With those game plans too, you know, we say it's a weekend game plan, but if the patterns are still the same, if it's still hot the next week or the next weekend, those same tactics and principles can still come into play. So be sure to not just use them for the weekend, but whenever you can. And if you can't get out every weekend, it's a good idea to be in the community so you can keep an eye on what's going on. That way, when you do get out there, you're not clueless as to what the trends and the patterns are. So that will wrap it up. Thanks again for jumping on, Peter.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Peter.
We'll see you guys next time. Later, guys.
Want more fishing tips, shortcuts, and tools so you can catch more fish per trip? Then head over to saltstrong.com now and join the movement. Tight lines, and thanks for listening.